in fleshing out these important ideas. But before that, I just want to show that when we talk about social protection, we talk about social insurance like PhilHealth, GSIS, Pag-ibig. We talk about social assistance, such as the conditional cash transfer program. We talk about safety nets. This would be relief operations during droughts, typhoons. And we talk about labor market interventions by which we provide schemes where we increase the employability of our workers. So if we look at the operational framework of government, this is a DSWD-led process, but it was an interagency activity as well. It talks about universal. And when we talk about universal, this official talks about a minimum level of income or consumption granted as a right to all citizens. It also talks about how providing everyone this minimum level of income and consumption may have to be a calibrated process, given that we are hampered with limited capabilities and even resources. So while that is the aspiration, we look at it in terms of how do we progressively realize this universal social protection? And here, if you look at the document, it talks about a universal social protection floor, which I will discuss in a minute. And then it already brings in the notion of a life cycle approach, where it anticipates that Filipinos and all individuals will in their lifetime will be faced with all kinds of risks, all kinds of disasters, all kinds of contingencies, and the need for the government to provide a template, social protection measures to make sure that when they're confronted with a risk, they continue to be able to live with a minimum level of dignity. They do not fall below a certain level of dignity. And that's where the notion of the floor comes in. I will speak to that later. And the document, we were also able to bring in the notion around transformative. What is beautiful about this is that here we talk about the need to address not just those factors that are symptomatic of poverty and inequality. We talk about the need to tackle the social structures that perpetuate, reproduce poverty. So we bring in a structural analysis, a structural dimension to the discourse and practice poverty eradication. And then we talk about the need for the government to allocate resources and programs as a matter of responsibility and the right of citizens to claim this. So this is the rights-based discourse. So again, in this document, if you will look at it, it talks about social protection as a basic human right, the well-being and dignity of individuals. It brings in notions of justice and social solidarity. And it highlights the needs of vulnerable groups, like persons with disabilities, older citizens, which I know Si Au will talk about much more extensively, and other important but marginalized or socially excluded groups. And here there is a matrix that was provided where it highlights in one column what are the different types of risks and vulnerabilities our people go through through one's individual life cycle from womb to tomb. And then it also identifies some of the main economic risks arising from natural hazards or those human-induced, as well as governance and political risks. And then it talks about the different types of responses. And we know that social protection is not only the purview of government. We know that house families, the community are also important providers of social protection, as well as private sector and civil society. And while households, families, civil society, and the private sector are very important mechanisms in the provision of social protection, that they should not be a substitute for government fulfilling its responsibility in providing social protection, because that is one of their important mandates. Now, I looked at the ILO inventory of social protection responses of the various governments around the world in relation to COVID-19, and I saw that the Philippines has been among the highest in terms of the provision of measures, in the provision of social protection measures in helping mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic. Of course, this also could be because of the depth and scale of our vulnerability, which necessitates for the measures. But nevertheless, we must also recognize na marami ding programang nailabas. What are some of these? In terms of social insurance, we know that the SSS provided over 1 billion pesos to cover unemployment benefits for displaced workers. These are just some of the examples. PhilHealth package was expanded to cover testing, COVID testing, including isolation, providing for the expenses for isolation packages, isolation benefit packages, as well as financing for pneumonia from mild to critical. And then they also provided a benefit package for community for testing for COVID. And then a number of social safety nets were provided or kick in. And dito papasok yung social amelioration program where 18 million low-income families were provided supposedly 5,000 to 8,000 pesos for 1 month to cover 2 months. And now we heard heard that an additional 5 million families will be added for the second tranche that will be released soon. We also know that the Department of Labor and Employment provided a one-time cash assistance for workers who were also negatively impacted. And there was also some assistance provided for our overseas workers. In terms of labor market intervention, do know that there was a 10-day emergency employment program that was instituted by DOLE. And then part of the labor market intervention, for example, was TESTA offering trainings so that our people could make sewing face masks, could sew face masks, and come up with do-it-yourself hand sanitizers and surface disinfectants, which have become precious commodities and skills in this time and age. So these are just some of the things or some of the ways by which our government responded to the crisis. However, we know that this process has not been at all easy. Beneficiary lists I earlier talked about did not necessarily include everyone who needed help. So may nabigyan sa SAP, sa Social Amelioration Program, pero marami pa rin ang hindi nakakuha. We also saw people lining up for hours under the heat, breaking social distancing laws. We saw barangay officials and local community members fighting over the SAP. And we saw a lot of charges filed against barangay officials because of suspicion of corruption. And the list goes on. So what are some of the challenges that plague our social protection system? Well, we do know that even prior to the pandemic, our social protection system was already confronted with basic issues and challenges, which, was only exacerbated by this crisis. So what are these? One, on the one hand, we saw a very progressive framework on social protection, which was finalized in 2019 or last year. But, having that policy framework written in a document and making sure that it is internalized, understood by the bureaucracy is something else. So there's obviously, and translating that into programs is yet another step that needs to be done. So obviously there is a need to deepen our understanding and internalization of what we mean by universal and transformative social protection. In a country where poverty and food insecurity are high, and when more than half of the labor force is engaged in low-value, precarious work, evidence shows that narrow targeted interventions are not likely to address the underlying causes of poverty or even to achieve adequate levels of coverage. Number two, we know that, access to social security, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, SSS, and even access to social assistance like 4Ps, it's very limited. For example, we know that many of our workers today are contractual. So access to social benefits are erratic and many of them don't have access. What about our informal economy workers? 60 to 80% of all Filipino workers are in the informal economy. In fact, there are around 25.7 million workers in the informal economy sector, which comprised about 63% of all economically active Filipinos. In fact, women workers in the informal economy comprise more than half of economically active women. We have been reminded that informal economy workers are and have always been essential workers. They are the street vendors and market vendors who provide a crucial link to food security and basic necessities. They are the waste pickers, recyclers who provide sanitation and solid waste services that contribute to public health. They are the domestic workers who are on the front lines of meeting hygiene standards and providing care, including for the sick and older citizens. They are the home-based workers who keep supply chains running. And today, many of them are the frontliners in the fight against COVID-19. Our barangay health workers, daycare workers, and other vulnerable workers who are not even oftentimes in the plantilla of government. Furthermore, we need to think about the fact that the virus does not discriminate. While the virus discriminates its victims across classes, does not discriminate its victims across classes, it discriminates brutally against the poorest and the powerless. Here, we have to focus on vulnerable groups like persons with disabilities, older persons and their families who need assistance and support, indigenous persons, homeless street children, and the like. To what extent are they in our databases? Do we all have their profiles, know where they are, and do we know what their needs are? How do we reach all of these individuals? Many of them are vulnerable. And how do we provide assistance in a manner that is efficient, systematic, and compassionate? So social protection programs also tend to be disparate and fragmented. Many of our programs tend to duplicate each other, and they end up targeting the same groups or offer similar interventions. Also, we know that there are administrative efficiency issues. For example, in social insurance, data membership needs to be be regularly updated. And there is a big challenge here. There's also a need for stronger enforcement of social security laws, as many employers in the private sector do not register as members in the social security system and therefore do not remit contributions. There's also the tendency to measure performance on the basis of how much ang na-distribute na natin, na-disperse na natin, and number of workers who have benefited. However, we must remember that welfare programs are aimed at reducing poverty and reducing job exclusion, so that it is better to look at not just output, but we need to look at outcomes. No? How many of our workers have been trained so that they have transitioned from welfare assistance to productive employment? And here this leads me to my last challenge or issue, which is how do we ensure the sustainability of our welfare and safety net programs? For as long as unemployment rates are high, so will we continue to rely on these kinds of programs. And if there's one thing that this pandemic has made clear, what our people need today are jobs, not just jobs, but quality jobs. So there is a need to transition the majority of our informal workers to the formal sector. So the pandemic has exposed the gaps and challenges that plague our social protection systems. Further, because of the lockdown and the sudden loss of income of many of our people, the national government had to immediately find a way to provide relief and assistance to all those who were immediately plunged into poverty and hunger overnight. So early on, our group, the Social Watch Philippines, recognized that the government would have a problem in reaching out to all those who would need immediate assistance because of two things. One, basically, what the government has in their database are the list of beneficiaries from the 4Ps. Beyond that, they do not have any systematic list of those who will be needing help. Second, we also know that the only infrastructure that has the widest outreach and rooted in the communities are LGUs. So realizing this, we in Social Watch recommended early on to the Department of Social Work to implement what we call group universalism, which is to immediately provide all impoverished and low-income communities their social amelioration program, provide the assistance to all. And since this approach proceeds with the assumption that all those living in these communities will need assistance, mga low income, mga impoverished areas, hindi na kailangan na magkaroon ng extensive validation process, thereby expediting the provision of services. Group universalism also includes providing all persons with disabilities and senior citizens and their families with assistance given their disadvantaged positions and the need for affirmative action. And here we also propose complementing group universalism with targeting poor households who may not be in poor communities, but in middle-income communities. You know, in middle-income communities, there are also those, yung iilan dyan, na hindi naman talagang middle income. There are those who are maybe needing help, including others who fall through the cracks of the group universalism approach. Yung mga ilang homeless, orphan children, stranded individuals like construction workers, drivers, students. So apart from group universalism, we can also do some targeting of these groups of people, including those who self-target, meaning those who will approach the LGUs for help. Here we suggested that the routine validation process of applicants be exercised with greater leniency or compassionate and efficiency grounds. So here we see how the complementation between the universalist and targeted approach. Now, why do we call for a universalist approach? Because of its many advantages. One, it reduces exclusion errors. You know, you provide people with some and others not, and that can be tragic during the pandemic and can be the basis for a lot of public dissatisfaction and unrest. It also expedites the delivery of assistance because you don't have to go through validation process. Remember that this assistance is a matter of right. As long as you're a citizen of this country, you have a right to that. And especially now you come from a low income or an impoverished community. Third, this process is also much simpler. It is less taxing on the national and local administrative system kasi lahat bibigyan, no? And then of course, because everyone in the community is provided assistance, it reduces issues of patronage politics and palakasan. And because again, everyone ay nabibigyan, it promotes the notions of social cohesion and solidarity because everyone benefits. It also reduces stigmatizing those who get benefits because it means that everyone because it is no longer seen as charity. It is seen as a right. So it takes away the stigma that may be attached to these kinds of assistance. So what are our recommendations? considerations. One, moving forward, government can proceed and operationalize its framework on universal and transformative social protection and strengthen its operational, technical, and administrative capacity. Let us use this momentum created by the pandemic to build what I call, or what is called, a better normal and a more transformative future, especially for those in need even before the pandemic and whose situations have now been worsened because of the pandemic. So one, what we can do is government must undertake a systematic assessment of our social protection system and address many of its policy and program gaps and enhance its capacity building. Second, we can operationalize the universal and transformative social protection framework, and we can do this or start with the universal social protection floor. Now, what is this floor that I talk about? Basically, it comprises 4 social security guarantees to be provided on a universal basis. It includes access to essential health care, which includes maternal care or maternity care, basic income security for children, providing access to nutrition, education, and care for other goods and services. It talks about a basic income for people who are unemployed or underemployed and who will need additional support, additional income, especially for those with disability. And it includes a basic income for older persons. As we know, we are not starting zero in relation to this because the government is already implementing a lot of programs that contribute to these social security guarantees. We have Pantawid Pamilya, we have our social security and pension schemes, and especially the recently enacted Universal Health Care Law. So all of these can serve as building blocks. However, what needs to be done is we need to scale these up gradually and progressively and in a way that it is coherent with national policies and it reflects the country's economic and fiscal capacity. Of course, we should also implement the national ID system. This is long overdue. It was enacted in Congress in 2018. The database should cover everybody and contain basic information such as age or disability status, because this can be extremely useful for universal programs aimed, for example, for old age pensions or child benefits or for persons with disabilities. And then because we want to transition people from welfare assistance to productive work, it is important that we support the bill on the Magna Carta of Workers in the Informal Economy. Ang kagandahan ng bill na to is that it talks about making sure that our informal workers are registered with their LGUs, which means that there will be a strong database for them in government. It talks about how the government should tap our informal workers to provide additional public services. So there's an element of job creation, and we should also provide them access to social protection benefits. And finally, we recommend that the government includes in its list of priorities, diba, may 10-point program ang administration. We believe that this should be part of their 10, 11, or whatever 12-point program, is to really have a focus on strengthening a national decent work agenda that will create productive work and promote employment, including creating jobs and jobs with rights. This agenda should be aligned and integrated with the Philippine Development Plan and Ambition 2040. Now, if the pandemic has a silver lining, it is that it helps us to rethink and reimagine our future for a better normal, a much more transformative future. You know, an unprecedented crisis which we are now confronted with requires bold thinking and action. And this has been summed up by Arundhati Roy when she says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through it lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And with that, I end my presentation. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rakiza. We talked about how civil society has influenced a more progressive language, no, on social protection policy that included the terms of universal and transformative principles. Just to sum up, we also talked about the different government interventions amidst this crisis, from livelihood to hospitalization to unemployment benefits. Although the question there is on coverage and sufficiency of these interventions. We also talked about the issues and challenges to social protection, and that includes the need to deepen frameworks of universal and transformative policies, and at the same time, the concept of group universalism, where everyone is covered and complemented with targets. We also laid out the different recommendations for a better norm. Thank you very much, Dr. Rakiza. Our next presenter is Ms. Aura Sevilla. She's an aging and social protection specialist, and we will talk about an inclusive, rights-based, and transformative social protection policy amidst this pandemic.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Just also an information, I'm also a member of the Social Watch Philippines. So until now, but I'm also affiliated with other organizations. So, but this time I will be focusing only with social protection. So just a background, my presentation is not totally different from Dr. Marivic, no. In fact, it's just a complementary, and then I'll just probably highlight lang some of the data or some of the informations that are already mentioned by Dr. Rakiza. First off, okay, so like what mentioned, I'm focusing then sa inclusive, rights-based, transformative social protection in response to COVID-19. As I've said, presentation is just more of like complementary, and also I will just highlight some of the information that already highlighted by or mentioned by Dr. Marivic. Basically, always our question is, what will happen when you are sick, disabled, pregnant, and old, lack sufficient income or any income at all because you cannot work? So like now, marami sa atin affected, or if not majority, ay affected by this pandemic. Like mentioned, mayroon tayong social protection for that. Diniscuss ni Dr. Marivic yung definition ng Philippines for social protection. But I will just like to clarify also or differentiate lang din that in social protection, we have the contributory and we have the non-contributory. Ito lang yung hindi na-mention. So when we say contributory, so this is our SSS, this is our GSIS, this is yung Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, kasi we all contribute to that. So yung contribution is, as we know, mayroong personal and also deducted from our salary and also contributions from the employers. Meanwhile, non-contributory is tax-based or tax-finance. So ibig sabihin, lahat ito nagagaling sa taxes natin. Although somehow they're changing the notion ng non-contributory kasi we all know naman na yung taxes is galing din naman sa atin. So kaya, but they call it non-contributory dito sa presentation na to. So there are others type of social protection like subsidies or tax breaks or things like subsidies, for an instance, paying the premium payments. Pwede rin yun. But just to differentiate, kasi this would be also what I will be discussing a lot in my future slide. We know it's a right. It's under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's also in the Philippine Development Plan. So I won't expound na on this. And it says it's universal and transformative. It's very, very clear dun sa Philippine Development Plan natin na dapat talaga we have a universal and transformative social protection. Ito, papakita ko lang. We have this framework which is binanggit na ni Dr. Marivic, but this is how we operate, no? Our social protection program. So it's very clear. Tingnan natin yung principles sa baba. Ito lang yung gusto kong i-highlight dun sa baba. Yung principles na rights-based, inclusive, and transformative. When we say rights-based, for an instance, hindi dapat natin tinitingnan whether a poor deserves, kasi lagi yun yung tinitingnan niya, if the poor deserves yung ayuda or yung social assistance. But we know for a fact that for rights-based approach, we recognize that there's a systemic problem that we need to address. Kasi laging naririnig natin, ako, tamad naman yan, kaya mahirap yan. We heard, meron tayong nakita na yung isang news na yung nagsabi na 8,000 kulang pa sa kanya sa 2 linggo. And talagang grabe yung inabot na pangungutya doon sa mga tao. Kasi they look at it na kaya maraming anak yan, kasi nag-anak siya ng anak, yun lang yung ginagawa ng mahirap. Ganun lagi yung pagtingin pag charity-based. But if it's rights-based, we recognize na women who have many kids are lack of choices, they are not empowered to do choices, or they don't have much choices like the other people, no? So I just like to point out yun sa rights-based, and also yun nga, social cohesion, freedom, and also yung recognition na dapat walang discriminate. Pag rights-based yung framework natin. And when we say inclusive, this means na disability inclusive, gender inclusive, it's also age sensitive. And when we say transformative, it's not just giving them dole out. You're giving them also the power so that they can change their lives, so that they can have the power to decide and have the options on what to do with their lives. No, hindi siya basta binibigyan mo lang siya ng ganito. That's what we say with transformative. So why social protection is important in the Philippines, like mentioned in Dr. Marivic, it's because of the informality. We have at least a lot of Filipinos are at risk of poverty, vulnerability, and inequality. So even we have SSS and GSIS, these social protection programs only cover the formal workers, and they provide limited protection for those low income and those who have informal workers. So konting shocks lang, sickness, death, old age, unemployment, disability, like what we're happening right now, konting shocks lang sa family, it will bring them to poverty na. So like this, most Filipinos are living in low incomes and moving poverty. Like this data from the FIES, which was done in 2015, it's an analysis by Sir Albert na makikita natin, nasan ba ang middle class? Yung middle class was earning around 30,000 to 78,000. Actually, ang akala natin, yung middle nasa gitna. But makikita natin na nasa upper bracket lang yung middle class. And they are very few. There's only 1 in 5 in Filipinos are considered to be middle class. And you can see that the majority, more than 50%, are low income but not poor, only receiving 7,800 below income, and these are the poor. So, but you can see here, very kaunti lang talaga yung nasa middle class and above. And we all know then that the poverty in the Philippines is a moving target kasi we have people who moves in and out of poverty. In fact, in 2004 and 2010, almost half of the household in the Philippines spend some time in poverty. So if you have like a poverty targeting system such as halimbawa yung listahanan is being conducted every 5 years. So if you conduct ang listahanan at the time na hindi ka mahirap and counting shocks lang, halimbawa na bagyo or nawalan ka ng trabaho, pero nung time na nag-survey, hindi ka mahirap, so yung tendency, hindi ka na nasasama sa database. Unless, yun nga, if you now apply, you can apply. Kung possible, pwede namang mag-apply. But again, sa listahanan, automatic, hindi ka na kagad makakasama. So, like mentioned din ni Dr. Rakiza, marami sa challenges ng social protection natin noon pa nangyayari. In fact, in 2015, ILO has recognized these challenges na only 34% of the population have social insurance. And 2015, so this is almost around 50% na siguro ngayon by 2020 kasi nag-expand ang social pension, nag-expand din ang Pantawid Pamilya program. So, but nonetheless, majority pa rin of the Filipinos do not have any form of social insurance. And konting shocks lang, alam natin, like this, like pandemic, ay apektado sila. And we can see, even then, highly fragmented na yung system natin. A classic sample of this is yung pension. Pension natin, we have 15 pension systems, magkaiba yung private, magkaiba yung sa government, magkaiba yung sa Coastal Guard, sa PNP, sa AFP, sa uniform personnel. So we have different pension systems. Ang alam lang natin, SSS and GSIS, mostly. Then we have the ones for veterans, so it's highly fragmented. Lack of coordination among agencies. This is very true din, no? And sometimes this is not only true externally, even within agencies sa loob mismo, hindi rin okay yung coordination. A classic example of this is yung halimbawa, yung database ng Pantawid is iba rin yung database ng social pension. So we know that even within the DSWD or in the agency, hindi rin coordinated well pa yung kanilang social protection system that they also implement. And then inefficient targeting mechanisms. I'll talk about bit about this more. And we know for the COVID, what it's teaching us is we are all vulnerable, and it highlights the importance of ensuring adequate social protection coverage for all. Na dapat lahat tayo can access it. What are the shortcomings exposed by the systems? Again, this is just a reiteration of what Dr. Marabic has said. But I'd like to point out this, no, that Corona didn't break the social protection system. In fact, coronavirus exposed a broken system. Yes, we do recognize that the government has a lot of efforts already on social protection. We have a very progressive framework. We have high investment in terms of social protection. You can see the budget allocation to social protection already increasing a lot, for in the past years, but you can see a lot of the problems and a failure of a social protection system. Because ideally, a good social protection system is something that you can rely on in terms of a shock like this. So like now, having pandemic, di ba, dapat we feel secured, we feel na, okay, alam ko, makalalagpasan ko tong pandemic na to, but how do we feel that, no? Nararamdaman ba natin yun? Or simply, nag-post lang ng coronavirus yung hindi natin marerelayan yung current social protection system. So I'll just expound a bit more. So we have targeted social protection system that leads large inclusion and exclusion errors. For instance, yung Pantawid Pamilya program natin, even before the the pandemic, there's a lot of issues na surrounding around targeting errors. And I will just cite this study by Development Pathways, citing na almost 44% is the targeting errors in the National Household Targeting System. If you can see here, yung blue one, these are the people that are correctly selected. Ibig sabihin, they meet the eligibility criteria, they are really poor, so they belong here. But above, we see a huge exclusion errors, meaning these are the people that supposedly or meets the eligibility criteria set by the government but do not receive the pantawid. And here below is the light blue. You can see inclusion errors naman. This is what they always say, marinig natin sa community na hindi naman dapat makatanggap yan. Pero bakit yan nakakatanggap? Kasi ganito yan. So lagi natin tinitingnan to, yung inclusion errors na to. So but even before the pandemic, even isa ang pantawid or NHTS with one of the most sophisticated targeting system in the world, there's still a high, like in this case, in this study that I'm citing, it's around 44% is being wrongly targeted. So when the SAP, the social amelioration programs, na-highlight din yun. Kasi targeted din yung ginamit na approach ng government natin. So because we only target a specific population, so we found a lot of issues surrounding around exclusion and inclusion errors. So like this one, and also this one. Cite ko lang itong mabuti, no? Itong sample halimbawa na to sa Nueva Vizcaya, there's a posting of the list of DSWD qualified. And if you can look at the reasons, you'll find many of these are very subjective. For an instance, may kaya. So what does may kaya means? Pwede bang kung kumikita ba ako ng ganito para sa inyo, may kaya na yon? Or yung isa, napaka-subjective nito. Tapos, living in Quezon City, tapos meron ding nakalagay dito with business. Well, reasonable naman kung may business. Pero ito, mayroong parents or OFW daughter. Pero alam naman natin that OFWs are also affected because of the lockdown and the remittances are also affected. And then nagpapaupa, husband are government employee or may anak na engineer. No? So parang ngayon, parang kasalanan mo pa nakapagpaaral ka ng anak na engineer. There's some sort of like that notion. No? But the problem here is there are also people who are excluded for no reason at all. Makikita nyo dito, meron nakalagay na no reason kaya siya hindi nakuha. And the issue, again, if we'll go back here in the graph that I showed, the issue is not much about the inclusion error. Na napasama siya kasi dahil napasama siya. Ang mas problema dito lagi is yung exclusion error. Meaning, yung mga talagang dapat makakuha, hindi nakakuha or hindi napasama. And most of the times, these are the people na mahirap talaga. Yung walang kakayanan, walang ID, walang kakayanan na lumapit sa kapitan or makipag-usap o ilaban yung karapatan niya. So normally, or hindi alam kung ano yung karapatan niya. So yan yung mga madalas na hindi natin nasasama. And yun yung mas nakakalungkot. Sa in a rights-based perspective, yung mga exclusion errors, yung mas dapat natin tinututukan. Halimbawa ito, isang stroke survivor nagmamalimos dahil sa kawalan ng ayuda. So we see a lot of these issues na hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin nasosolve. And then second, na expose ng pandemic is the lack of shock-proof administrative system for social protection. Again, what we're expecting of a social protection system is this, that we ensure transfer reach the right people at the right time, in the right place, in the right form, and the correct amount. Yan ang laging challenge ng payment delivery system natin. We have to make sure that the people receive it in the right time, right form, and correct amount. But what happens during the SAP? Immediately, when the outbreak announced and the lockdown, ang unang-unang lumabas sa balita, March 17 nag-lockdown. March 18, ang unang sagot or announcement ng gobyerno is suspend ang social pension. Social pension is the 500 subsidy or cash assistance for indigent senior citizens. If you are poor and ni-lockdown ka, you're expecting na dapat kung makakatanggap ka ng social pension, malaking tulong sana sa iyo yun. But what happened is that immediately after the lockdown is kasunod yung announcement na hinto din ang social pension. So for those poor senior citizens who's relying to this, of course, kagad na-stress. Kasi, paano yon? Hindi nila matatanggap yung 500 na inaasahan sana nila. And by the way, hindi 500 yung binibigay monthly. Binibigay ito every 6 months. So, what are exposed as well? Half of the target beneficiaries, ito yung mga naging problem pa natin. Pamimigay ng cash aid. Breaking yung mga problem. And then, even as of March 13, even nagsimula na yung social pension program, only 14% pa lang ng target for this year ang nabigyan. And then we have a lot of issues about local officials. So what are the other pitfalls of payment delivery? Yung data collection, yung IDs, alam natin yung daming problem. And communications, ang daming problems sa communication. Kasi dahil din sa pabago-bago natin na guidelines. So, it takes time before ma-reach yung ground ng bagong changes or yung changes sa policy. Targeted schemes are often administratively complex, expensive, unlike universal approach that is easy to administer and has limited scope for manipulation and schemes by local elite. Kasi sa targeted schemes, you need to allot social you need ng mga validators. So, alam naman natin. Also, the pandemic exposed yung tinatawag natin na missing middle in the social protection. So, who are the missing middle? So, again, balikan natin yung graph kanina. Usually, social insurance covered ang middle class or above. Kasi these are those who are receiving, these are formal employers or formal employees or business owners, own account workers na are covered by the SSS or GSIS. On the other hand, meron tayong social assistance for the poor. In the middle, ito yung those who are vulnerable but are not covered by either social insurance or social assistance. These are usually the informal workers, the OFW, farmers, gig economy, freelance. Kita natin, no, lahat, pati mga nasa event industry, mga artists, photographers, lahat din sila affected din by this. Kasi when they don't have a regular source of income to contribute to SSS, tapos kaya hindi rin sila covered ng social insurance. And then they are not categorically categorized as poor kasi they have some sort of income. Pero that disqualified naman sila sa social assistance. So inexposed to nung ating So we have a lot of issues surrounding here. In fact, nakita ko sa isa sa questions, bakit ang middle class excluded when in fact they are also paying for the taxes like I mentioned. And even so, merong social assistance ang mga formal workers. Yung pandemic also exposed na these are often limited, both scope and benefit level. Nabanggit kanina, halimbawa, senior citizens with pension, excluded kagad sila sa social protection program. Even the 3 and 4 SSS pensioners below 5,000 and below. But they are included. Also, even we have an insurance, employment insurance, ang sabi dito, kailangan nakapag-contribute muna ng 3 years and then dapat mayroon kang 12 months na consistent, dapat 12 of which are done in the 18 months. And this is a problem for those workers na contractual, project-based workers na usually qualified here because of the irregular premium payment. So again, they cannot be qualified in the unemployment insurance. Then next is targeted approach creates tensions within community and can promote corruption and clientelism. Yun nga, nabanggit, palakasan and such. So ayan, nakikita natin, DSWD wants to report ineligible who receive subs. So of course, nagdoon din nagkakaroon ng pagtatalo-talo between the communities na bakit siya ako hindi kasama. In a pandemic, this is a problematic kasi we need to be cohesive at this point. Dapat tulong-tulong tayo. And then what we also found out is that disability inclusive, gender responsive, and age social protection is lacking. If you can see in the graph, those families living with persons with disability, they have higher cost than families who are not have persons with disability in their household. So ibig sabihin, dapat mas mataas yung ayuda for families na may disabled or persons with disability sa household. But hindi, pantay lang din yung makukuha kahit may persons with disability sa bahay or wala. And also, most of the guidelines are gender blind and gender neutral. In some studies, malaki ang magagawa kung ipapangalan mo sa babae yung beneficiary. Kasi it gives the women empowerment. It gives the women a sense of entitlement and she holds yung pera. But here, very gender blind and gender neutral yung natin. And you can see as well that it lacks age sensitivity. We have a lot of cases na nagkaroon na stroke yung lolo sa pagpila ng cash aid. So, or lola, sa dahil hindi rin sila nakasama sa. And then, in a bit, this is a question, is a social protection ba natin? It also favors the rich. As you can see, the most immediate response then, recently, ngayon, ng government, is to push for the lowering of corporate income tax. And as I mentioned, tax subsidies or lowering the tax could be tax breaks as some form of social protection. But this might only provide protection for the richest. But this is what I'm happy to share. At least in this pandemic, we've learned that after all, universal social protection is a political will. We've seen a lot of cities who said push for universal social protection like Manila, Pasig, and Quezon City. So what are the responses worldwide? Just to share, nabanggit din to kanina, there are many who are using social protection as a crisis response. The most common is cash transfer. Then what's the role of in this new normal? Now we're on this crossroads. We recognize that the government government has done a lot in terms of social protection, of social safety nets, and then we've exposed a lot of issues with the previous, with the current social protection system. So what now? Where are we going? Are we going still to continue with the austerity context, limited coverage, minimal benefits, gaps in protection, no decent work? Or are we pushing for a more universal social protection system, including floors, with universal coverage, adequate protection, comprehensive protection, sustainable and equitable financing, and adapted to the world of work and rights-based? This is what we're proposing, no? A life cycle, inclusive life cycle approach to social protection, so that at least every child has a child relief, every paternal have maternity benefit, have survivor's benefit, have an employment benefit, and every older persons have a pension and disability benefit. But this comprehensive social protection cannot build overnight. So we know that it has to build na matagal, and then maybe the pandemic is calling us to start building this, that there's a really need to build on this. Some of the things personally I find a policy proposal that are important right now is, well, universal child grants, but we know that Pantawid is targeted at the moment and there's a law and it might be difficult to amend it. But then we have the SSS premium subsidy for informal workers, nabanggit din to kaninas under the Magna Carta for informal workers. But we can also enhance or top up yung unemployment insurance. What we can also push is for university disability support allowance. This is on top of the Pantawid, this is on top of the social pension. Ibig sabihin, additional support ito for those families living with persons with disability at their household. And finally, universal social pensions. This also promote policy coherence, because this is my most of the focus of talaga of my work is on aging. So I'd just like to share a bit about our push for pensions or universal social pension. So we're pushing for universal social pension because of the following reasons: no targeting errors, all poor senior citizens will be reached. It provides security for low-income informal workers. Eligibility criteria is transparent and easy to understand. And then receiving pension as a right, not a gift, avoid stigma of being poor, and cheaper to implement with lower administrative costs. Kasi you can simply look at the database of the SSS and GSIS who are receiving pension or not. Then finally, what are the roles of universal social protection at this time? I'd like to highlight that it's not just a mere dole out. It can provide, especially in this context, post-pandemic, it can provide a major stimulus to the economy, reducing the severity of the forthcoming recession, while many businesses and producers would continue to find markets for their good. You're giving people a purchasing power. So ibig sabihin, iikot din yung pera. For an instance, we did a simulation of what if you give everyone, every senior citizen a pension. We saw that based on the simulation, it will increase particularly large for agriculture activities and for boosting household consumption, which is what we need post-pandemic. And we also find that it will reduce poverty as well among older persons. So it will help many families living with elderly and recovering from the pandemic. And other factors or other roles of universal protection include protecting human rights of child and development, reduce the risk of domestic violence, and help keep individuals food security and well-nourished. And I'd like to emphasize then this one, that it will decrease the likelihood of erosion of social cohesion. So tataas din yung social trust and cohesion, since citizens will be able to clearly see that the government is caring for them in an inclusive, easily understood, non-controversial, popular, and transparent manner. Lalo na ngayon, lagi natin sinasabi, bayanihan, we heal as one. But if most of your policies are divisive, so how can we heal as one? So we need some policies that people would feel that we are all in this together. Lastly, if you build a universal social protection floor, it would help build a posterity, a system that is more capable to help avoid, mitigate, withstand, and recover from crisis in the future. So even there's a new crisis, so we know that the family have a basic income, they are well protected, so we know that they can withstand any future shock. But always a question, how yung cost or financing, just to highlight, even those low-income countries have higher spending on social protection. Well, you can see here, yung Philippines is one of those who are very low investment in terms of social protection. In terms of lang din to kahit sa Asia Pacific. And we always say, if the size of the pie is fixed, it makes sense to concentrate scarce resources of the poorest, like minimal number lang ng tao yung dapat makuha. But however, more people covered by a program, the more popular it will be and the more funding it may attract. So syempre, if lahat makakatanggap, lahat would be encouraged to also contribute to more on taxes. And one of the things then that we are promoting is progressive taxation, meaning you must tax yung mas mayaman talaga. Second to the last slide, what is weak breaks under new pressure, what is strong holds, and what was hidden emerges. In the aftermath of disaster, a change of consciousness and priorities are powerful choices. So we saw already dito, ngayon ko lang talaga nakita yung mga tao na napag-usapang mabuti ang social protection. Never sa tagal na namin nagtatrabaho sa social protection, mas ngayon talaga glaring yung interest at saka talaga yung pangangailangan natin na magkaroon ng social protection. So I hope that this pandemic also opens new possibilities or new change of mindset even among government na ngayon kung naging posible na may electronic payment, why cannot keep them? Why can't, if ngayon kaya pala natin mag-distribute ng 18 million families in 2 months, why can't we do that in the coming months or in the coming years? Kasi nagawa naman natin during a pandemic. So to build from the lessons from this, and we have to think about how to improve it. Lastly, I'd like to share lang, I'd like to emphasize lang this one, that social protection is a human right. Social protection should be, like in this case of pandemic, it should give us peace of mind and a hope for a better future. So all for my sharing. We're all in this.
Thank you, Ms. Aura, for presentation. We learned so much about the principles of rights-based social protection. And it's not a matter of you deserve it or what, because the language is that, for example, in a lot of policies that you have to be poor but deserving. But it's actually your rights inherent to you. And the ills are also systemic. And at the same time, and this is new to me, about half of Filipinos are vulnerable to income poverty, which is very alarming that at the instance of a death of a breadwinner or illness or natural disaster, it'd be so easy for people to fall into the cracks of poverty. And how 37 million of Filipinos don't have social protection, or only 34% have existing social protection policies or are covered by it, and that there are flaws in a targeting scheme where chances of exclusion errors is large. And at the same time, the possibilities of increasing and deepening our concepts of a rights-based, inclusive, and transformative and universal social protection policies, as we've seen in the previous couple of months on how the government was able to mobilize resources for all of this. So thank you very much to our presenters for this afternoon. We will take questions. I will read them from our Q&A box. I've sorted a few of the questions according to those that have already been answered during the presentation. At the same time, the diversity, of course, of our participants as well. First, a question from Ferdinand Salaga. What is the extent and impact of the social protection interventions or initiatives done by the government in the local and national spectrum? Well, I think we've discussed extent, pero impact is, are we able to measure impact and sustainability of the social protection initiatives during this pandemic? Okay, si Dr. Marivic can go first.
So the social protection measures have been rather, while they aspire to be extensive, they were covering 18 million Filipinos, 18 million families. That's about 78% of total Filipino families using the 2015 PSA data. And then they're adding 5 million more. So there is some ambition to be extensive, but of course we know that that's also a bit problematic because we don't know if it has really reached 80 million Filipino families, because we know that, as Ao has been mentioning, mataas pa rin yung exclusion. So many of these families and those who need have not been included. And then second, the question is sustainability. Okay, you got 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 for the first month, and then another for the second month. Assume a best case scenario. What happens afterwards? Afterwards, madali lang naman maubos yung 5,000 na yan. Madaling maubos yung 6,000 na yan. Especially if you come from a huge family, which is also the norm in the Philippines. That's why one of the things that I am most fearful about and concerned about is right now, I think we are in the midst of a food crisis. in the midst of a hunger crisis. The Social Weather Station survey has come out and said that we have achieved record level highs in terms of self-rated hunger. About 5 million families have said they are now hungry. And so I think that the government needs to be much more strategic in their interventions. What we need to immediately address is the question of hunger and the question of food security. At dito malaki yung role ng, we need to go beyond social protection, because social protection is fine. But when you're talking hunger and food security, you need to bring in agencies like the Department of Agriculture. We need to talk about maybe setting up just para yung kumakalam na tiyan natin, para mais. We may have to set up community kitchens. No? We need to go into small scale agriculture types of activities, both in the rural and urban setting. And I think the DA is starting to do this. They're talking about a seed program and the plant program. But again, we need to see ano ba talagang nangyayari doon. And then of course, support for micro, small, medium enterprises. How do we get them back on their feet? 99.6% of all MSMEs, 99% of all businesses in the country are MSMEs, and 89% of that are in the micro sector. So we need to help these. To me, these are the areas where we should strategically intervene to ensure that people are able to eat properly and are able to get back on their feet in terms of the economic factor and well-being and overall well-being. So these are just some of my suggestions.
Thank you, Dr. Marivic Raquiza. Small-scale agriculture, community kitchens, and assistance to MSMEs. Ms. Ora, yes, do you want to add to the question? Or
none so far naman. But
Okay.
meron lang din dito on how extend and impact of social protection initiatives done by the government and local and also how can we monitor the sustainability. It's actually, yung mga presentations namin are just mainly from a broad wala pa rin talagang study that has been conducted on this, and I think that's worthwhile doing then after when it's possible to assess talaga what has been the impact of those money na nilabas ng government for specific response for social protection.
May question dito on fiscal adjustments, no? What fiscal adjustments have to be done in order to fully fund these universal social protection policies? And I'd like to connect it din to Congressman Tom's question, no, on tax revenues, kasi tax revenues are the source of most social protection policy programs, and our taxation system is regressive and collection is also low.
Yeah.
What's the proposal? Do we earmark taxes to directly fund the social protection policies, or rely on annual GAA given by Congress?
I think that there are a number of fiscal measures that can immediately be explored. One is to improve tax collection. Even prior to the pandemic, alam naman natin that tax collection rates have been among the lowest in the region, at least in Southeast Asia. This is an area that, well, on the other hand, alam din naman natin that many of the businesses ay medyo bagsak. The BIR will have to exercise some degree of nuancing in this regard, but that does not take away the fact that there is still a need to improve fiscal tax administration, improve our tax collection system. Because even prior to the pandemic, tax evasion is a widely practiced. No? So this is something that we need to look at. Number two is to remove all regressive tax measures. For example, matagal na sinasabi ng mga iba't ibang grupo that maybe the VAT tax, the tax on VAT, the tax on diesel is a regressive tax. Pampabigat to sa masang Pilipino. So maybe now more than ever, we should start to explore removing many of these regressive taxes, which was part of Train 1, no? And even prior so-called tax reforms, padami yung mga regressive measures. Now, I saw in the chat group, some have been suggesting that we should tax POGOs or even tax the Catholic Church. I think that we should be open to these proposals because we know that many of these institutions are quite rich, in fact, very, very rich. And this leads me to my fourth point. In many countries around the world, they are already exploring the notion of a wealth tax, taxing the richest 1% or 0.001% of a country. I read in the papers the other day that our dollar-denominated billionaires, we have dollar-denominated millionaires rather, who are in the Forbes list, who are now investing in gold. Are we taxing these kinds of investments? So these are things that because they can afford afford to pay more. And this is where the notion of social solidarity comes in. Those who have more pay, and progressive taxation also give more. So what we need, however, is not simply to identify and monitor. Right now, we can identify and monitor income, but do we really have a system to identify and monitor wealth? This is something that we need to look at. And then once we find out where these are, how do we implement and properly tax those who can actually afford to give more? So, siguro yun na muna.
Thank you, Doc Marivic.
Yeah.
It appears na yung mga proposal nga ngayon is more of bent on taxing digital transactions, mas consumption-based, taxing Netflix, taxing Lazada, taxing all digital transactions. But no discourse yet on these wealth taxes. Si Ms. Ora earlier presented rate, no, or yung tax, corporate tax cuts. And that presents an revenue loss for our government when we need it the most. Ano po yung comments nyo on the Create recovery program ng government?
Well, if you're talking about, sa akin, simple lang, pag MSME, I don't think we can go easy on taxing, especially the micro enterprises. But if we're looking at the big, richest corporations, the practice in other countries now is at the minimum to maintain, if not tax more. It really makes us wonder why we are, taxing less. Unless it can be proven that they're really negatively impacted, I think it stands to reason that we can be open. But by and large, if they're earning so much, and there is, in the context of massive tax evasion, we know that has been happening, and there's data to support this. Why are we even exploring the corporate income tax for the richest companies? It goes against the global trends now in terms of raising funds for COVID for those who need it most.
Ms. Ora?
I'd like to answer lang din very specific yung questions din ni Kong Tom sa specific dun sa investment for universal social protection. Before, in 2015, we did the assessment-based national dialogue, and we computed how much it will cost if we provide a certain universal social floor, no? But that time, yung cost is around 5%. This includes everything, no? And it was 2015. Pero hindi siya na-approve ng cabinet by that time kasi they find it na medyo stiff, medyo mataas pa daw yung 5% ng GDP. So, until na hindi pa siya na-push. But I'd like to share this very specific na computation na ginagawa namin for social pension. This is only for social pension. There are several bills now that are filed in both Senate and Congress on universal social protection. I'd like to discuss one lang, yung kay Senator Risa Hontiveros, yung lingap kay Lolo at Lola. So, her proposal is to cover all 65 and above. Meaning, basta 65 ka, covered ka kagad ng social pension. And ang cost from the current 500 pesos, gagawin niyang 1,000 pesos. And then, ang targeted nga lang yung 60 to 64. Meaning, select individuals, select senior citizens lang yung makakakuha if you are 60 to 64. Kasi ang reason naman nito is gainfully employed pa yung age na to. But 65, that's our mandatory retirement. So, at the age of 65, every senior citizen can get 1,000 pesos. Even may SS ka or may GSIS ka. By and large, this will cover around 75% of the total population of senior citizens by 2020. And this will cost 85 billion pesos. By GDP, we estimated that this will cost around 4.4%. Ibig sabihin, wala pa siya sa 1%. But this will enough cover around 75% already of the senior citizen. And we look into how much this will also cost. If you look at the overall government expenditure, it will only be 2.3% of the whole government expenditure. So, maliit lang siya. And we look at how much the bill, halimbawa yung bill ni Senator Risa will cost from until 2045. We're talking about sustainability. We look at 2045, it will cost, if it index with wages, it will cost around 1%. But it will, if just continued lang yung trend growth, so it will just be around 0.6% of the GDP. So, I mean, and then with pensions, you can also adjust the age. For an instance, tumaas yung retirement age, and of course, pwede mong taas yan yung age ng makakatanggap ng social pension mo. So, those are some types of ways how to sustain it as well. Yun yung sa current proposal namin. And what do we think about earmarking? Of course, problema nga yun, saan mo siya i-earmark? we cannot earmark it with sin tax kasi you need more people to smoke a cigarette para ma-sustain. So we need, in general, we are thinking of general appropriation. This is similar. For instance, the government is paying the pension and gratuity funds of around 300,000 retired uniformed personnel, and we have around 180 plus or 120 plus billion pesos allocated for this. So we have a huge lump sum in the government, in the GAA, that needs some scrutiny, and also we need to look at those na mga huge lump sum then with the GAA na we can use to fund this kind of programs. And yes, the third question is on financial inclusion. Yes, I think that's one of the things that was revealed by this crisis is maraming walang bank accounts, marami ang walang electronic payments, cell phones, and I think this is the right time for the government to promote financial inclusion. Seen in Thailand when they implemented the universal social pension, even the informal workers, older informal workers have their own bank accounts, and then they can get the pension through their bank account. So they don't need to line or things. So they are transferred in this. So I think these are possible as well in the Philippines.
Thank you, Ms. Ora, for providing yung iba't ibang mga data on the cost and at the same time the expenditure but also the benefits. I'm sure na investing on social pension, it will really boost the economy because yung mga senior citizens natin, di naman nila ilalagay yan sa Panama or any tax havens compared to when you give that large amount of money to big corporations. There's a question here also on the missing middle class, no? Why are the middle class neglected in social welfare policies? Last week lang, one of our senators got a lot of flack for saying na dapat hindi sinasama yung mga middle class. What is their situation at the same time? How can they be included, and what does social protection policy look like for the middle class? Who'd like to start?
I can go ahead. You know, the reason why the middle class and the low-income communities are oftentimes excluded is because of a mindset where we're constantly looking at the poorest of the poor. You know, and not just the poorest of the poor, we link that with the deserving poor. Meaning, it's an ideational framework. It's an ideational policy framework that those who deserve government assistance are only those who are among the poorest. And if you are not the poorest, then you do not deserve. And so you know, so that also puts you in a situation where you need to target. So saan ba ang poorest? So hindi na pwede lahat kasi you have to go. So it pushes us to do very narrow targeting because ang hinahanap natin ay the poorest. And that has always been for the longest time the discourse and mindset and practice of many of us, you know, government, but even us in CSOs. Of course, we understand that the poorest bear the brunt, but because we know that social protection is a right of all, and we know that risk and contingencies is not unique to the poorest. All of us face risk and contingencies. Therefore, everyone should have a right to all of those government programs. Ang problema, hindi ganun ang mindset. Kaya, if you are not in the poorest of the poor scheme, wala ka na. Kasama na dyan ang middle class. Ngayon, you know, I was amused with the discussion in Congress and the discussion about bakit kasama ang middle class sa SAP. And there were some figures provided about sino ba ang middle class na to. And, you know, so there was one who talked about yung income class, pag lower middle income ka, pag middle, and upper middle income. And then I remembered that in 2018, when there was a big controversy about what constitutes, you know, a decent income for a family of 5. Kasi hindi lumalab. Kasi right now, the poverty threshold is 10,000 pesos for a family of 5, which translates to anywhere between 69 to 72 pesos per day, depending on your exchange rate fluctuation. And 69 to 70 pesos per day per person. So if you're earning a peso more than that, you're no longer poor. You know, it's kind of ridiculous. It's a very low poverty threshold. So NEDA came out finally to get some of the controversy over and done with. NEDA came out and said, no, the poverty threshold really should be 42,000 pesos per month for a family of 5 or 504,000 pesos a year if that family were to enjoy a decent standard of living. And I was comparing this 42,000 pesos a month to the figures provided last week on the middle income, and And it would look like for those in the middle income and lower middle income classes, they are earning much lower than 42,000, which means that a huge section of your middle class, going by this perspective, also need support. You know, many of our middle income classes, for example, they have an apartment na pinaparenta nila, or they have an eatery, or they have a private school that they're running. Because of the lockdown, wala na yung many of the people renting are not able to get rental fees, they have to close down their eateries. Their schools are shut. So tuition fees have been stopped. So what happens to the income of these people? Does that make them less qualified to get support from government? So here a pandemic really provides in all its gory detail how all of us generally are affected, and why social protection is really supposed to be universal. So these are just some of my thoughts about the middle income class, the missing middle. We need to get out of that mindset. We need to think about universalism, how all of us must enjoy these rights, must enjoy support, while also providing affirmative action to those who will need it more. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Doc Maribel. Ms. Ora, do you have something to add?
Sa akin lang din, yun nga the purpose of like just having the middle, no? I'm covering middle as well. Kasi at certain point of our lives, talaga lahat tayo will experience some vulnerability. Like even kahit formally employed ka at certain point of your life, bigla ka na lang, may biglang magkaroon ng chronic illness sa family, like cancer or things talaga, maghihirap yung family. So we need a certain type of protection na alam natin, kahit basic, meron tayo. And then for those who are rich, who are really rich, that might be covered, there's always an option to opt out from the program, or they can use it as well from for donations, like what we've seen, that there are people in Pasig, because everyone is covered, so yung mayor just said na kung may kaya naman kayo, wag nyo nang kunin. So but because people, they get it kasi they think they need it, no? They don't have to be stressed themselves na, paano ba ako makakasama dyan, or they have to lie about their circumstances para lang makakuha. So yun yung ayaw natin mangyari. We need it to make it really feel that everyone is included, and then that their needs are also recognized.
Thank you very much. Nakita talaga natin yung disparity din, no, of how in the time of the pandemic, maybe yung big corporate suppliers get so much ease when they, bid in procurement of different supplies. Pero at the same time, yung poor and middle class have to go through the eye of the needle in order to get what little aid they can have at the time of this pandemic. May question din dito about decentralization. Social welfare is decentralized, and the pandemic showed how difficult it is to orchestrate a systematic approach to providing social protection in a decentralized system. How can we approach universalism given how social welfare should be decentralized? And at the same time, we can also connect kung paano yung decentralization, pero we also want to address yung problem on fragmentation. How can we complement both and at the same time address yung fragmentation?
I'd like to respond on that. Yes. Although mas masasagot yan ni Ma'am Maribel kasi nasa public governance sila. Pero top of the idea lang, or one of the things that we're promoting is have really a department or a unit, a bureau at least in a certain government that handles all the social protection programs of the government. Kasi as of now, what we only have is a subcommittee under NEDA. Ibig sabihin, and they only meet like quarterly. Ibig sabihin, they just talk really about things, about updates and things. They only look at that. I think it's about time that we really have. In other countries, yes, they have some specific offices like Office for Social Protection. We don't know yet the details under which agency or under which office this will be. But I think it's very important institutional mechanism among different governments implementing social protection program na magkaroon ng at least one office that coordinates all the social protection programs of the government para meron talagang isang kumpas. And then very important next yung pagkakaroon ng social registry. I'll cite an example. In Kenya, they have different social protection programs, but they only have one database for all the programs. So they call it One Kenya. You know that you can access this, you can Google it's really good kasi you can see who's receiving child benefits, who's receiving pension. Everyone can access it and how much dun sa LGU nila yung covered. It's very transparent, no? Kasi they would see, even iba yung nag-implement, like with the help of LGU, but they see it in one database. You can see as well yung duplication. Baka mamaya nasa isang LGU to, tapos sa kabilang LGU tumatanggap din dahil meron siyang anak doon. So, dalawa yung tinitirhan niya. So, with one unified system, social registry system, yung social protection natin, mas makikita mo, mas magiging transparent siya and mas easy siya na implement.
Before Doc Marivic's response, question lang, Ms. Ora, on this Department for Social Protection. Kasi earlier in your presentation, you mentioned na social protection encompassed from providing employment benefits, hospitalization, to maybe skills and assistance to livelihood. Should that all under one department, all of that?
To be honest, hindi pa din namin ito napag-usapan mismo sa social protection cluster. But some ideas are like a coordinating agency, at least yung ganon, yung it's a alam naman natin, halimbawa sa implementation ng law ng senior citizen, may tinatawag na National Coordinating and Monitoring Board. So may at least na talagang strong institutional basis and also institutional support yung mga programs. Hindi lang, I understand, yun nga, may subcommittee. Pero, I mean, this subcommittee is only meets every quarter. So, hindi niya talaga nakikita, or I think, baka pwede rin i-assess. Yun lang naman. I think it's about time that we assess as well these institutional mechanisms we have.
Thank you, Ms. Ora. Doc Marivic, paano po yung decentralization pero universal, pero we also address fragmentation?
Okay, let me answer that by giving you a story about our struggle with the universal healthcare law, pushing that. Kasi in our desire to push for progressive universal healthcare law, tinignan natin at yung ilang mga pag-aaral na nangyari. Yung isang pag-aaral na lumabas is a 25-year study of healthcare reforms na ginawa ng UP School of Economics. And one of the biggest findings is that health outcomes in the country deteriorated because of decentralization. Why? For various reasons, one of which was incapacity of the LGU to absorb health programs, to run health programs efficiently, effectively. So they were administratively unprepared for many of them. They didn't have enough resources. And ang lumalabas din talaga, kung hindi prioridad ng LGU, ng local chief executive, ang health, hindi talaga mapaprioritize. And we saw this also. Right now, I'm part of a study in Social Watch and UNICEF on child protection. Ganun din. Kung hindi priority ng local chief executive, ang child protection, hindi talaga siya din mapaprioritize. So, when we were pushing for the universal healthcare bill, many of us advocates and some academics and even those in government, it was in the tip of our tongue to want to call for renationalization. Because we need, if it was so weak below, in not all, hindi ko nilalahat, you have islands of good governance, but generally, if it was generally weak below for many reasons, even including political economy reasons, then you need a strong developmental center. Because prior to decentralization, health outcomes were better when you had a centralized DOH. And I will just point you to that study. Now, studies also show once you have decentralized, it's very hard to go back to re-centralization. So we have to approach a kind of middle ground somewhere. And that's currently what is being worked out sa implementation ng UHC law. And this is one of the things that I'm thinking that we need to imagine also for social protection is how can central government play a bigger role in making sure, and dito papasok yung isang advocacy namin, which is for the national government to see which among the LGUs need support. Hindi pantay-pantay ang capacity and resources ng iba't ibang LGUs. Iba ang capacity ng LGU ng Makati, Quezon City, sa capacity na sa North Cotabato, sa Kidapawan, or sa, other places. So some LGUs need more support from the national government. And we believe that the national government has a role to play in providing affirmative action for LGUs who need additional support. We call this promoting interregional equity, na hindi nagagawa. Ang ginagawa mostly ay tinitignan ng LGUs as if pantay-pantay sila, and then they're asked to comply with all the rules and regulations without also seeing that not all of the LGUs have the capacity to comply compared to others. So dapat tinutulungan din ng central government yung mas hirap na LGU. And this brings me to my last point, is we really also need to strengthen, not my second to the last point, we need to strengthen LGU capacities, their administrative capacities, their technical competence. Many of these LGU members are not even, many of them are not even regularly paid staff. How can you expect committed frontline public service delivery when they're still worried about their own day-to-day, their own livelihood? So we have to talk about professionalizing the work sa LGU and providing them support. And finally, studies will show that in local places with the best development outcomes, there are two ingredients that you need most. One is that you have a developmental local leadership, a leadership that is very clear about the outcomes it wants and has a clear strategy on how to do that. And the second ingredient that you need to make sure that outcomes at the local level are up and running good is that you need a strong civil society. You need strong social movements, because even if LGUs falter, nandun kumakalampang ang CSOs, ang social movements at the local level. And an example of this would be, well, of course, in India, you have Kerala, many places around the world, no, where a strong civil society, strong social movements always lead also to better health outcomes, better developmental and social outcomes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kiza and Ms. Ora, for your answers. We have 10 minutes left in this webinar, so I've taken the liberty of sorting through the questions, no? But we can also email some of the questions here that will not be responded in the call later to our research person, so that maybe they can also answer some of the questions. Pero there's one here about identification and verification, no? Because some LGUs use the list of voters to identify and verify recipients of SAP, but this could be susceptible to patrimonialism. So what could be the other identification and verification approaches? Some are saying that we do away with this. Some are saying that the proposed national ID system, there are also security risks involved in that. So what is the best response in order to verify and identify without the risk of patrimonialism? Anyone can start, from Ms. Ora or Doc Marivic.
How you want to start? Sige, I can.
Okay, Doc Marivic can start.
I think yung nagtanong, well, my former student who's now going to be a lawyer soon.
Okay.
Anyway, so actually this is a $64 million question. Kasi how do you give assistance when you don't know who to give it to? And so you have to target, and we all know the associated risk with targeting. But which is not to say we don't need, this kind of database. Of course, one is the national ID system, but again, we want it to be used for universal social protection, not for narrow targeting purposes. And we can have a conversation around this again in another forum. And of course, it must be used in a way that it does not trample on our civil liberties. It does not trample on data privacy issues and the like. Now, the informal sector community is also pushing for registration of informal workers at the local level. And alam naman natin na yung informal economy workers, that's a huge swath of Filipino population who could be registered at the LGU level. And that in itself can be a very powerful tool, no? Kung mangyari ito. And that could serve as an important starting point. My third is, it's very important for LGUs and even the national government to work with CSOs, to work with community-based groups, to work with NAPSI, basic sectors. One of the things that I am very much saddened is that, in all of these structures that have been set up to fight COVID, nawawala ata ang boses ng CSO, not because we have not been pushing, but because parang hindi tayo masyadong napapansin. And so we have made a clear recommendation for monitoring programs, impact, effective ba o hindi. We, CSO, social movement groups, community-based groups, we are in touch, and many of us, our people's organizations, can tell if these programs are working, ano pa ang kailangan. We have not seen enough representation in any of these bodies, whether at the LGU level or at the level of the IATF. We are asking we would like CSOs to be represented, people's organizations to be represented. Because this is one of the ways by which we can help validate, one of the ways by which we can tell government if their programs are effective or not, and what else can be done.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Marivic. Ms. Ora, if you're joining us now, the question was on how can we identify and verify recipients without using the voters list, which is prone to patrimonialism, please, in order for us to hear you.
Okay. Yeah, that's a major challenge yan, no? So, currently kasi, we have a social registry, what we call the National Household. Pero, yun nga, the problem with this list is only the Pantawid beneficiaries are there. So, I think yun, like with other countries like doing them, like Pakistan, they have the national ID as the basis of one of the who would be the recipients. This is much easier for yun, if the scheme is universal. Kasi with targeted, you have to really identify who will be um you have other layers pa of verifications. And as I mentioned, pag naglalagay tayo ng mga eligibility criteria, and then you need to have a targeting tool, and then that targeting tool most of the times are also take a lot of indirect cost in terms of social protection. So, um, so you need to validate. Lagi na namin itong problema with social pension. 10 years na yung social pension sa Pilipinas, pero still hanggang ngayon wala pa ring maayos na database, wala pa ring maayos na listahan yung 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 program to identify who are really the recipients of social pension. So I think yun yung problem if sa design pa lang ng programa. So I have nothing against with those implementing it, but yung design ng programa is very important. We have to make it more inclusive sa disenyo pa lang ng program natin so that pag in-implement sa baba or pag in-implement sa community.
Ayan, thank you very much. I think that's all the time we have. We thank our panelists, our resource persons. So we'd like to thank our resource persons for this afternoon, Doc Marivic Raquiza and Ms. Ora Sevilla for the different information that we've gotten, and at the same time the discussions and questions, most especially no, on how we can envision this better normal, not just after the pandemic, no, but something that we can work towards right now, even while programs are being implemented for families affected by the lockdown, for workers who are displaced that are about 2 million. At the same time, we've talked about different concepts that we should use in order for us to radically shift to a more responsive, more transformative types of social protection policies that for years we have been told we cannot afford it, or for years we have been told that it's not efficient, and yet we are seeing that it's being implemented right now, and it's actually we will see in the next few months, no, on the impact and sustainability of this, but apparently it can be done. So thank you very much as well to our participants who are here. Again, for some of your questions, we can email to our to our resource persons, and I think PowerPoint presentations are also provided much later. Pero you can also like the Facebook page of Active Citizenship Foundation in order to stay in tune for other webinar series and other information that we can all join and participate in for the next few weeks. So thank you everyone. Keep safe, stay at home, and at the same time we can continue these conversations on how we can change for a better normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Justin.